Sosuke.
Ponyo loves Sosuke.
We interrupt this program to bring you...
All right, everybody, my name is Kevin.
And I'm John.
And I'm Adam.
And I'm Julie.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. It's May, ladies and gentlemen, so you know what time it is. Real Anime. Real Anime is a special event where we take a look at all your favorite anime movies, and this month specifically, we're taking a look at the works of Studio Ghibli. Today, we're going to be reviewing Ponyo. A 5-year-old develops a relationship with Ponyo, a young goldfish princess who longs to become a human after falling in love with him. Okay, guys, it's been some time since I've watched Ponyo. I remember a big fuss about this movie coming out. It was after the whole Spirited Away release and all that. Disney was in the prime of releasing these movies. The biggest thing I remember with this movie when it was first released was Disney super hardcore compared this to The Little Mermaid. And there is truth to that. Hayao Miyazaki, who's the director and writer for this movie, he did say, and it is stated, that this was loosely, I put the little air quotes for those who are listening, and for those seeing, you can obviously see it, quote unquote, loosely based on The Little Mermaid. And I would say that's pretty accurate, but overall, what I gotta tell you, Ponyo's a good time. I don't think it's Miyazaki's best work. I think most of his movies are way better than this, in fact, at this point. But for what this is if you're looking at it as just a simple kids movie with a little bit of a deeper meaning, that if you look there, it's there for you. You're gonna have a good time with this. I think kids will really enjoy this, and I think that is truly the target demographic audience. Kind of like how Totoro is more focused at a smaller audience. I think Ponyo is kind of the same way. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty with this movie, Adam, what'd you think of this one?
So this is my first time seeing Ponyo.
Okay.
But it definitely gave off more of a kids movie vibe, which, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you could definitely tell that it's more geared towards kids. But it was good still. I did enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it has its merits for sure, and we're going to talk about all those different things. But yeah, I think there is some really great things working out with Ponyo. John, this is your first time, obviously, watching this one. Now, were you aware of the Little Mermaid comparison when this movie came out or anything like that with some of the promotional stuff?
No, I think you told me about
Okay.
The Little Mermaid resemblance to this movie.
Right.
But yeah, I can see it in it, but it was an alright movie.
It was an okay movie?
Ponyo, this is very strict. I thought Ponyo, when I met the character Ponyo, I was like, oh, is this a Pokemon character? Seemed very Pokemon-ish.
Right.
I was like, we'll see how this goes.
So what do you think about it being a kids movie? Did you definitely get more of a kids vibe with this movie? Because I feel like it definitely is something maybe your kids would definitely enjoy more, maybe find more engaging with it being the bright colors and just all the energy that's in this movie.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing about Miyazaki's films so far. He has some that are very adult oriented, and then these that are very focused on kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this one was very focused on children, which I thought was a good thing and interesting.
Yeah, I think that's good. It is good to diversify your portfolio, especially we've gotten some pretty hardcore deep themes, with Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, especially about anti-war themes being dumped all over us and everything like that. Sometimes it's nice to come back to, a little bit of a happier place, because you can tell Miyazaki's definitely going through some things with some of his movies and some of his interpretations, which will actually come up in a later movie that we're going to talk about. But yeah, Ponyo's is a nice shining example of happiness, I think, in some of Miyazaki's work. Julie, how about you? What did you think of this one? I know you were a big fan at one point of this movie.
Yeah, I remember when this movie was coming out, because like you said, I feel like there was I don't know, maybe 3-year span where they were kind of coming right after another with Ponyo and then Arrietty. I remember being plugged a lot on TV, especially Ponyo having Noah Cyrus and then the bonus Jonas, what's his name, Frankie Jonas. I remember that being advertised a lot on the Disney Channel, having the siblings of Miley Cyrus and the Jonas Brothers, being the voice, title voice actors in this movie. I really like this movie. I didn't like it as much on the second viewing as the first movie, but it's just really fun. It's a happy movie. I love the bright colors, the music, the visuals are great. It's definitely not as heavy hitting as Miyazaki's other movies. This is definitely more. I know we've talked about this in our other movies. Like, is this a kids movie? Is it not a kids movie? And I even think from the perspective of like my students, like, I love this movie. I'm giving this movie a 10 out of 10, but I know my second graders are going to be bored by it. I think that they would sit through Ponyo for the most part without talking.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with kind of what I said before. There's a lot of adrenaline in this movie, right? Like very early on, there's a lot of energy. And it's interesting because like the first, 3/4 of this movie, I'd say, feel like that. There's very fast momentum. The movie keeps going. And then you get to the end, though, and it kind of does slow down, which is a little bit of a negative I think we'll talk about later. But for the most part, this movie is just very fun, very energetic. It kicks off its story strong where we see Ponyo, escaping from all her sisters and wanting to become a real girl. And it really does move the pace quite quickly. And I think that's a good thing. Again, I think it's going to keep kids kind of entranced. The one negative it's kind of like a positive and a negative, which I feel like I do have a lot with this movie. This movie's astoundingly beautiful. I think we can all agree here. This is probably one of the most beautiful Miyazaki movies to date. Water is a very hard feat to capture in animation, especially to have it transparent or have a shape or any form of that nature. But the way Miyazaki has the waves almost become characters of their own. They're not just waves crashing into the water or to the beach. It's they turn into fish, or they have some kind of form, or there's a nice sea foam kind of brimming at the tops of them. One of the most beautiful scenes in the movie is when Ponyo's running on top of the water when she's chasing. When she's chasing after what's his name? Sosuke. I can't remember. That's terrible.
Ponyo loves Sosuke.
Yeah, when she's chasing after Sosuke in the car, that's one of the most beautifully rendered scenes in the movie, where the mom's driving all crazy on the road and she's just running on. It's a sight, and that's what I think he does. One of the issues I think, though, is Miyazaki's very show in this movie, and I'm curious if any of you guys felt this as well, that there was a lot of just really long takes of scenes where it's just scenery. It's almost as if Miyazaki's kind of just showing off how beautiful everything is. And I think to a small degree, I think the story kind of suffers a little bit from that, because we could have used a little bit more with some of these characters. Again, we are saying that this is more targeted towards a young child demographic, but did anybody else feel that maybe some of these long shots felt a little overindulgent at times, where it's just hey, look how beautiful this scenery is? And that seems kind of what Miyazaki was more focusing on in this movie.
I agree. I think I would have liked more, lore, especially with Ponyo. Her mother is obviously the embodiment of the sea, but I would have liked to know more about her dad, because he makes a comment that he used to be human and he gave it up, and now he's kind of a protector of the sea. And then even I didn't look it up and I'm regretting it now, but I remember watching it, and he's, has his potions and putting it in that well. And then you see these different, I don't even know what they are.
They're dates, it looked like, right? It was
but there was dates on them, and I wanted to look up the significance of it, and are these natural disasters? So I feel there was some extra stuff under the surface that I would have liked more information about. But yeah, the visuals were astounding.
Yeah, and I think it really is one of the key features of this film. If anything, it looks absolutely beautiful. And again, I think as far as a young audience, that's kind of what they look for. A lot of younger children, they don't necessarily need this deep lore-rich story. They kind of want to see the shiny colors flashing and what's happening in the movie. They like that fast pacing, and Miyazaki caters to them for sure. Go ahead, John. What do you think?
I think that Miyazaki should come up with a horror movie based off of this, and take the side of the sea people, because in the whole entire movie you feel they're trying to take over, they're almost trying to get rid of all humanity, and it's kind of hinted in this, but I feel he can do something in a way that would cater to more of the adult audience with this whole premise and
it's funny that you say that, because there is definitely a very early on, I don't know if it's just because Liam Neeson lends the voice to Fujimoto, who's Ponyo's father. He's pretty angry early on in this movie about how oh, humanity has to get destroyed. I don't even care. There definitely is a sense of that early on in the movie, and I kind of see where you're coming from. That would be an interesting twist on something if they pulled that off.
That dude was strung out.
Yeah, he was strung
out. He had dark blue circles under his eyes. He was probably my favorite character.
He was, and I don't know. Does anyone think it was maybe? I tried to watch some of the subtitled version of this just to have a little bit of a comparison at least. I didn't have as much fun with Fujimoto as I did. I don't know if it's just because it's Liam Neeson's voice coming out of that mouth that makes it that much more entrancing to me. Anyone else just like really admire that?
He was phenomenal. I really enjoyed his vocal performance, his exasperation with humankind, and then Ponyo and his daughter. I think he delivers one like, "Listen to your father," and they're all running off. He was just great.
What'd you think, Adam?
I thought that, I don't know, it seems like a lot of times that with the English voiceovers that, I don't know, maybe it's because we speak, fluent English, but they capture so much more emotion than we would get with the Japanese actors. Like a lot of them, it just seems like it's very flat.
Right.
Like it's just kind of a line delivery. But with these, especially with Liam Neeson, it's just like, I mean, even all the other movies that we watched too, like some of their line deliveries were just so much more emotion behind them.
And what do you think? Now, this is again the period of Disney that we're seeing right now, where they're kind of taking over the dubbing duties of these films. It's an all-star cast for the most part for this movie. Cate Blanchett, Liam Neeson, Matt Damon, a lot of big name actors in this movie. Adam, do you think that's distracting from the actual movie, or did it not bother you at all?
See, I was thinking that to a certain extent, it feels like they're just putting in all these prolific actors just to be like, hey, look who we got to do this movie. And it's the same case with every other Miyazaki movie.
It does,
because
right?
they're all, high prolific voice actors. Or actors in general.
And it's interesting that that these actors kind of want to do I don't know if they have to contractually, or they have to do these movies. I don't know what the case is. I don't think so though, because even Christian Bale, I know, who they interviewed with Howl's Moving Castle, he wanted to do that movie. That wasn't something that like Disney said you have to do. So I wonder, like getting like Matt Damon, Cate Blanchett. Like Cate Blanchett, really, she doesn't really do much outside of what she's contractually obligated to do at any time. So it's interesting to see that they're able to get these level of people.
I'm curious if they have to like audition for these roles,
or if they just go in and say like, "Sosuke, you take my daughter, I'll find you, and I'll kill you." I was waiting for that to come the whole movie. By the way, I don't know if anybody else just call Sosuke up on the phone. I'm not a very dangerous man for people like you, Sosuke.
I feel like with this movie and even the next one we're going to cover, I feel like the people they picked were definitely very like Adam said, I don't know if they had to audition. I think they were definitely approached like, do you want to do this? Because if you think this is like what, mid to late 2000s, like even Tina Fey, like she was at like the peak of her career at that point.
2008. Yeah.
Right. And Ponyo and Sosuke, they're the siblings of like the biggest pop stars at that time. And then even when we go into Arietti, like it's other like Disney Channel people and other famous, popular comedians at the time. So I think, in my opinion, they were definitely approached. Where some of the older movies, I don't know if that was the case necessarily. Like when Christian Bale did Howl's Moving Castle, I don't know if he was at like, the caliber that he would eventually go on to go.
Right. I mean, I would make the argument though that the kids are well cast though, at least, even though that they are definitely like, they're definitely the siblings of the Disney new sensations at the time. They fit the roles that they're cast in. Ponyo, excellent voice, and Sasuke, they have a great chemistry together. And if anything, I think we've seen throughout these Miyazaki dubs so far to date, foreshadowing, so far to date, there's definitely some great chemistry there with these characters, I think. And the casting director really seems to know what they're doing when trying to get these child actors. And that's hard to do. I really do think so, especially with any kind of anime. Live action aside, animated I think feel like it's even harder because they have to emote with their voice. Now they don't even have actions to support themselves. But I think Ponyo does a really good job with that. Another thing I think that's really interesting with Ponyo is some of the symbolism in this movie. Now the theming, is anyone else starting to feel Miyazaki being a little heavy-handed with some of his theming in his movies? Something I did want to address previously, I thought, with Howl's Moving Castle. While I love that movie, I gave it a 10 out of 10. It's definitely heavy-handed with its themes. I think we can all agree about its anti-war theme is like a sledgehammer in a china shop, almost like war is bad, get out of here. We're seeing some more of that now. Is anyone else noticing that with like Miyazaki's themes? Because I saw that really with like this whole health and vitality thing he was trying to push in this movie, where like all the older people, you know, they're all sickly and old, but they're pushing like, oh, the health and vitality of the older generation, and you know, bringing cleaning of the sea is a big one. Like he's very big into the environmentalism of the whole movie, finding synergy. Did anyone else feel that it was a little heavy-handed at times in this movie?
It feels like with every movie, he's just like, let's up the ante. Let's up the ante.
Yeah.
Or he's just trying to tackle all these, you know, big controversial topics every single time. So I guess maybe he's just checking boxes at this point.
Right. It's like he feels like he needs to cover these really big themes, but the irony is that the initial plot itself, the story of Ponyo and Sosuke, is a very juvenile plot. And sometimes I wonder if there is a bit of disconnect between these like really heavy themes he's trying to push, and then you have this simple plot. Kind of is ironically, I think the plot's a little more interesting than the themes that he's pushing in the movie. That's kind of what I was more drawn to. And I think because of these plots, I think some of the pacing is what kind of ultimately hurts this movie towards the end.
Well, I do think what's interesting, like especially with the comparison of The Little Mermaid, in The Little Mermaid, it's just like, oh, humans are bad. You can't go to the human world. They're awful. They're awful. But there's not like a ton of evidence in the movie.
No, none.
If you really, you know what I mean? From like an ocean environmental factor. But, you know, when you first meet Ponyo, she's getting scooped up with trash in a net, you know? So then that, I feel like that makes the conflict of her going to land and falling in love with a human makes it more like there's more stakes. And that's why Fujimoto is so angry with it, is because this is what humans do to our world. And you're going to go out there and, you know, fall in love with one, live with one. There's more, I guess, consequences to it. It makes it more impactful.
Right. And I think, again, the whole thing is I really love the energy of this movie, and it does a good job up until the end. And I don't know if this is just me. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think. But once we get to the finale, Sasuke's mom has to return to her job to help the elderly at the retirement center, or the home, wherever she works, to help them because of the flooding and everything. And then we're kind of left with this, like, almost, it feels like another movie is kind of happening almost, right? Sasuke and Ponyo are left alone to their own devices, and Sasuke wants to go find his mom, and him and Ponyo have to go travel to find her. Again, it's a fun adventure. It just feels kind of randomly thrown in there, and there's not much conflict, or there's not much buildup. It kind of feels like how Totoro felt as a movie. If I could think of anything as a comparison, it's like there's kind of like a little bit of danger, but not really. It feels like everyone's just going to be fine. And ultimately, I think the payoff where Ponyo decides that she wants to, or Sasuke actually decides he's going to love Ponyo forever and she'll remain a human girl. Yeah, it's a payoff, but it just feels kind of, the whole thing from that point to the end where she becomes a real girl just kind of feels kind of flat for me for the rest of the movie there.
Yeah, that little part there, it felt to me like a direct to DVD sequel.
Yeah, right.
From like the beginning part of Ponyo, and then all of a sudden you got that little part there at the end there.
Yeah.
But that is the vibe that I got too.
Yeah, again, it feels flat, and it's interesting because even Ponyo as a character, she's losing her energy, she's losing her ambition. I don't know if that's part of it, why it even felt even worse, because we had this super energetic character throughout the whole movie who's curious about everything that's going on, wants to explore, yada yada yada. But yeah, she's like falling asleep, and I'm kind of like, do I want to fall asleep? Because this is getting kind of boring now. Like, I don't know. I was losing interest, I think, towards the end. What do you think of that, John? Did you start to lose a little bit of interest at the end there? Because
oh yeah, I started to lose interest 3/4 of the way through. I started to feel like Ponyo going downhill.
Yeah,
and I also thought,
go ahead, yeah.
His mom, and she's an absolute terrible driver, so I wouldn't want her looking after anybody, let alone the old people that have to deal with her. But okay. But then, like, I felt like with this movie, there was some things I would get rid of.
Okay. Because
I felt like the way that it was broken up into, I felt like it was a little bit slow for me.
Yeah,
at points,
yeah.
I would say.
No, you're not wrong in that observation, I don't think.
Which is why, like, that part especially feels even more weird at the end, because it's like you spent so much time with other things, and then this, you were just kind of like, oh, brush it through.
Yeah, and I think like a way they introduce characters too. Like Fujimoto is like is Ponyo's father. He's like the main antagonist, quote unquote, throughout the whole movie. And then suddenly Ponyo's mom kind of gets introduced randomly. Like we kind of heard about her, but she's the goddess of the sea and all that. They introduce her and she's like there for a hot minute. And then like, oh, they have to pass a test. And it's like, okay, well, if they don't pass the test, the world's going to end or whatever. The sea is going to swallow everything whole. It just seems kind of random in pacing, right? Does anyone feel like it just feels very jumbled? And we've talked on this channel again about Miyazaki's writing style, where it seems like he lets the story come to him as he's writing. And I definitely got a sense of that in this movie, where suddenly Ponyo's mother, who was non-existent for the first half of this movie, suddenly becomes a main character. And off screen, she's having conversations with Sasuke's mother, which I thought that was kind of weird too. They have this big conversation, like everyone's like, oh, they're talking over there. What are they talking about? Never really comes up. It's just like, oh yeah, they were talking, having just motherly chats, I guess. And that's kind of like the end of their story. Again, there's a lot of things that I think needed a little further explanation. And I just don't think Miyazaki was interested in giving it. I think he just felt at the time he wanted it in the movie, and that's all he's going to do.
Like maybe if he didn't address all these other worldly issues, then maybe we could have got, a couple more fleshed out characters and maybe a little bit better of a story with, I guess more character building.
Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with focusing on a children's story. I really don't think there is.
Right.
I think that's a great thing, I think, honestly. But you got to pick a lane, like we've kind of said in other movies and stuff like that. Like, what are you going to do? You can't be an elevated social thinker and a children's film. Sometimes you can. You can definitely strike a balance between the two. I do think it's possible. This just wasn't it for me. I think it was just a little too jumbled towards the end. But again, it's not that it's not enjoyable. It just kind of feels like a mess. And the bright spots really are just Ponyo and Sasuke. And when they're not on the screen, or if they're talking about something else, the movie's 100% less interesting. Even if it's just like scenery that's beautiful, them not being on the screen hurts the movie, I think.
Even with what Adam was saying with fleshed out characters, like as much as we love Fujimoto, at the end, I wish there was like some kind of resolution between him and Ponyo, because they were so at odds with each other throughout the movie. And like, I feel like they didn't get like a proper send off or goodbye, where, he does say, right, Ponyo, I hope you live a wonderful life with, and then she hug him or something like that. Like, I would have liked something like that between the two of them. I was like, no, bye.
Yeah, and Miyazaki...
that becomes a Disney movie then.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
that's right. Reconcile.
And then they go,
Yeah.
oh, you've really copied everything.
Yeah.
He's got to do it his own way.
Yeah, and you could tell Miyazaki, there's obviously, and he said it himself, that there's Little Mermaid comparisons. There definitely are, but again, it's typical Miyazaki fashion, where he likes something and he just takes like 3 or 4 things that he really likes and kind of turns it into his own story, which I do appreciate. I do appreciate a lot of that. And you see that even with Ponyo's character. Ponyo, we didn't even really talk about her like transformation throughout the entire movie. It's very subtle and very cool. I actually really liked it, how she kind of starts off as like, she's pretty much like a frog almost. She's kind of like a tadpole, and then she kind of like grows legs and pops up arms. Her design's really cute and really clever. I thought they did a really good job with that. And again, that's just more like the Miyazaki tricks, like he really does make these interesting characters, because any character he puts in the movie, which is something, again, we'll talk about a little bit later in some of these other reviews, his characters aren't just characters. They feel like people. They feel like living things, the way they move, the way they interact with each other in the world. I can't say that for most anime is, as you probably know at home, anime is like a cost-cutting measure kind of style of animation. They have their scenes where things are great, and then they kind of just have almost like stock recycled footage throughout to save money. That's kind of how anime was invented as a genre. Disney, they kind of do similar things, but I think they invest a little bit more as far as their animation. But again, I don't even know if Disney can compare to some of the way these characters move in this movie, because again, they feel truly unique. They feel like more than just characters. Again, I think they feel like people, and Miyazaki has said as much in some of his interviews. With all that being said, though, I think we're ready probably to give our final scores on Ponyo. I'm going to give Ponyo a 7.6 out of 10. I think this is a fine movie. There's definitely some weaknesses with it. I definitely wasn't the target audience. I'm going to be 100% real with you, so maybe there's some bias there with that score. But overall, I think it's a fun time. I think the dub does a really decent job. This is my preferred way to probably watch this movie. I think the Japanese version just as suitable for those as well. But if you're looking for something, especially for all you amateur animators at home, this is one of those movies to examine closely. The bright colors, the styles. This is what makes a Miyazaki movie that special. Not just a Ghibli movie, but something created and designed specifically by Hayao Miyazaki. This is what is kind of like the epitome of what he can do. Is it a little heavy-handed? Yeah, at times. I think the theming is something he just... And throughout his entire career, he's had a hard time kind of balancing in his movies. But Ponyo, if you're looking for something fun just to throw on, has a fun soundtrack, I don't think you're going to be disappointed. Adam, how about you? Where do you stand with this one?
I'm going to give Ponyo I'm going to give it a flat 8.
Sasuke! Sasuke! Ponyo, you okay? Good morning, Sasuke!
Yeah, I enjoyed it still. I know it definitely fell off for me towards the end there, and I think that's definitely where the deduction of points came from. But I mean, overall, I would probably watch it again.
Yeah, I could say it would definitely be in my rotation if I were doing like kind of what we're doing now, a little Miyazaki marathon. I think this would definitely pop up. I wouldn't see a reason why it wouldn't. So, okay, fair score. John, I'm looking at you. What are you thinking over there?
Oh, you're looking at me. You wonder what I'm thinking. I give this a 7.0.
Fish with faces who come out of the sea cause tsunamis. That's what they always say. Tsunami! Tsunami! It's here!
I think Miyazaki is a good storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
and I enjoy his work of art as a whole.
Okay.
I do feel like he has some brain farts in the middle that he throws into these movies. I think he's just a little sleepy sometimes, but throws it in. But the movie was alright. It's definitely a kid's movie. Not one I would say I'd go watch again, but
But
to
it's
each
good.
his own.
Yeah, it's good. You would say it's good. All right, fair enough. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Miyazaki, to put it more elegantly, I think he's just a man. He kind of loses the vision along the way sometimes. I think he's kind of like a dog when he sees like a car drive by. Sometimes he just gets distracted with something else, and he has these really bright and innovative ideas. He loses his way, then he's like, "Oh, I got to go back. I got to go back and finish the movie." And
He sees a squirrel, runs away.
Yeah, that's what it seems like sometimes. And again, it's not that it's not breathtaking and it's not beautiful. It's just not focused. And I do see that happen quite a few times throughout his career. All right, fair enough, John. I can agree with that. Julie, last one. What do you think?
I'm going to be giving Ponyo an 8.2 out of 10.
I can't believe it. No, she's turned into a human. Hold still. What are you doing? Hold still. Girls! Girls! Stop! Stop! Please! Stop now! No! Stop! Respect your father!
I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first time, but I still really do like this movie. The voice actors really bring it to life, along with the beautiful animation. I kept teetering, like, do I do a flat 8 or do I go a little higher? I definitely enjoyed it more than I didn't like it. I love the character of Ponyo. She's just so full of energy. And Liam Neeson as Fujimoto is fantastic. That little dip at the end brings it down for me. But this is definitely, I would say it's in my rotation of Miyazaki movies.
Yeah, I can agree with you. Again, I do think it does deserve a place in Miyazaki's catalog just for what it's achieved with its animation alone and the character design of Ponyo. She is a relatively popular character, within the Miyazaki universe, and I can understand why. Even Miyazaki has said that this is one of the movies, before he does The Wind Rises, which we'll talk about a little bit in this series, he was going to do a Ponyo sequel. That was actually one of his original ideas to go and do because he did love this movie so much. I'm kind of happy it didn't happen, and we'll talk
Aren't they
about...
coming out with another one though?
Not another Ponyo. He's got another movie coming out.
Oh, I thought I thought I saw something about Ponyo too.
No, it was talked about for a while, and that was like his big thing. But then he got distracted with The Wind Rises, which again, that's something we're going to talk about in a future video. But again, Ponyo comes recommended from us. If you get a chance, check it out. It is currently streaming on HBO Max with the Ghibli collection. Check it out while it's still there, because who knows what's going on with HBO. You might want to get on that real quick. But thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. That's Adam, John, Julie. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll catch you next time. If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, we should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.